Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I congratulate Faisalabad Literature Festival organizers on their latest successful attempt at celebrating the power of the written word and the intellect. Having acquired a reputation for world-quality textiles and fashion fabrics, the city is now preparing to give Karachi, Lahore and Islamabad a run for their money in offering yet another exciting and ready platform for writers, readers and publishers to come together in a common appreciation of literature and the arts. My experience of the earlier festivals held in the city has been remarkable and exhilarating. I am personally delighted with the presence of younger and livelier audiences each year. This is a sign of the times, where the creative spirit reaches out to invigorate the intellectual life of a city, because literary festivals are more than just a meeting place for literary and artistic minds. They are true festivals, celebrating all that is good and perhaps great about the human imagination. So, heartiest congratulations. I'm sorry to disappoint my friend Asad Nadeem Sayyed, but today I am going to talk about women, wisdom, and growing old. How's that? Let me begin with a quotation from an extraordinary man, Mao Zedong, who said, "Women hold up half the sky." History is also witness to the fact that wisdom was associated with women more than men, not only in the ancient past, but in Judeo-Christian times. There was a time and a place where woman wisdom, known as Sophia in ancient Greek, walked the streets. We find her name again and again in Jewish, Christian, and pagan papyrus texts. Sophia, a mystical female presence whose appearance is only fleeting in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, was clearly once a household name and a fixture in everyday lives. There was a time when female wisdom was foundational to popular belief. Unfortunately, Sophia became a casualty of geopolitics. When Christianity developed as the dominant religion of the new Roman Empire under Constantine I in the 4th century AD, it needed to be tidied up. Suddenly, Christians didn't have just a faith, but a territory of their own. And a muscular military structure protected the domains of the one true God and a burgeoning population of scribes and clerics, all male, set out to protect the new Christian canon from heresy. Some things never change. And just as men today consider themselves guardians of women in curtailing their lives within the confines of Chadar and Chahdiwari, effectively disempowering them, so too, in the past, it was decided that womanly wisdom needed to recognize her limits. A point made by Orthodox Christian writers, and I quote, they say, "She stretched herself forward until she encountered the power that sustains and preserves all things, called the limit." There was also a nagging Christian worry that Sophia might be a bit too Jewish, since Sophia corresponds neatly to the Jewish Pokam. Karma is allowed little elbow room in Jewish scripture, but when she appears, most notably in Proverbs 8, she is, and I quote again, described as better than rubies and all things that may be desired. She herself says, I am understanding, set up from the everlasting, from the beginning. Whoso findeth me, findeth life. Unfortunately, her karma too was a victim of what may be called the male study hall syndrome, when a phalanx of scholarly men elected to write the personification of female wisdom out of the center and pushed her towards the periphery. This was not always the case. At the birth of society and civilization, a religious landscape littered with feisty female deities makes wisdom women's business. There is Nisaba, the Babylonian goddess who looks after the stores of grain and knowledge in Mesopotamia. The Hindu goddess Saraswati, the Zoroastrian Anahita, the ancient Greek Athena who sprang from the head of Zeus, Ceres, the goddess of harvest and grain, and the Shinto Umaikani, the goddess of holistic thought and multitasking. But come the end of the Bronze Age, and many of these deities were demoted. The original Proto-Indo-European root for wisdom, vid, means to witness, to see, or spark an idea. Sophia too comes from a root that means clear and visible. Consider, for example, the prehistoric word for mind, manu, which gives us our word man. Originally did not mean a male thing, but instead a thinking being. Descartes adopted that as an axiom. When asked to prove he existed, he said, I think, therefore I am. Islam is perhaps the only religion which addresses both men and women believers. And as we debate the role of women in society today, it is worth reminding ourselves that wisdom in all its forms was originally recognized as defining our species, not sex. I would like, therefore, to begin with placing women where they should be. That is, center stage. And there can be no better start to this than Maya Angelou's poem titled Phenomenal Woman. Pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model's size, but when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, I'm a woman. Phenomenal woman. That's me. I walk into a room just as cool as you please, and to a man, the fellows stand or fall down on their knees. Then they swarm around me, a hive of honeybees. I say, it's the fire in my eyes and the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist and the joy in my feet. I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. In her 1949 seminal text, The Second Sex, the French writer Simone de Beauvoir argued that women were at a disadvantage in society because their very existence was circumscribed by a multiplicity of incompatible myths about women. Instead of being encouraged to find their own place in the sun, learning to soar as high as their dreams would allow them, choosing to marry, if at all, or marrying men of their own choice, having only as many children as they wanted, male or female, in other words, have freedom over their own bodies, Beauvoir argued that the myths proposed to women, whether in literature or history, science or psychoanalysis, encouraged females to believe that to be a woman was to be for others, and especially for men. This is true of all societies, yet perhaps truest in patriarchal ones such as ours. If all women in this hall paused for a moment to stop and consider their own childhoods, they would come to a very similar conclusion. Throughout childhood, girls are fed a steady diet of stories that lead them to believe that to succeed as a woman, one must first be a good daughter, sister, wife, and finally, mother. Even as far as adding value to oneself, while male children were and are continually urged to and are financially supported by parents to get the best education, since it translates into being a successful man with a better job and marriage prospects, a woman's education too often leads her to feel torn between choosing freedom and choosing love. Woman, wrote Beauvoir, is doomed to feelings of failure and guilt because if she succeeded at conforming to mythical ideals of femininity, she would be a mirage, not a person. I see, in this sense, the first strong woman in Muslim history as none other than Hazrat Khadija, our beloved Prophet's first wife, reputed to be far older than himself when they married. She was not only a successful businesswoman in her own right, had grown-up children from her previous marriages, resourceful and intelligent, plus intuitively inclined to believe her young husband's terrifying first encounter with the divine. So what, I ask you, is not to like about a woman such as this first Muslim? Yet, centuries later, and ironically, it is the Muslim women who feel the strongest pressure to conform to rules drawn up by their own men. Beauvoir's readings have us believe that this paragon of strong womanhood is confined in housework, a kind of work that is disproportionately presented to girls and women as part of their feminine destiny, as a great way of showing their love for others. The myth of the strong woman also indoctrinates women to think that if they love someone, be it a husband, parents, child, the selection of wool and flax, keeping the light burning late and rising early while resisting the temptation of the bread of idleness, these are only an expression of love to support her family's flourishing. Rarely, if ever, does she stop to ask herself, but what about mine? My own argument about Beauvoir's objection to the strong woman is that since we never hear her side of the story, it is impossible to know whether her industriousness flows freely from her own values and vision for life, or is merely a result of conformity to the ideal of industriousness, to the idea that her raison d'etre, reason for living, is the comfort and convenience she gives to others. In the 70 years since the publication of The Second Sex, more women have entered work, and feminists have coined new terminology to name the kinds of burdens today's strong women are expected to carry. The mental load, the double load, the third shift. But on this subject, Beauvoir's voice is still worth hearing. Her point was not that the work that is needed to maintain life doesn't matter, nor that economically productive or creative labor is inherently more valuable than care. Her view, and I agree with that, is that fiscal or monetary work is no guarantee of women's freedom. The independent woman understands that in many respects, what the strong woman does should be honored, but she doesn't think that love means doing it all alone. On a more contemporary note, we tend to talk in terms of culture, tradition, sociology. Of course, culture is hugely important, but to ignore human biology is just as wrong. Women are thinking creatures just as men are. For me, there is no such thing as a human nature which allows for superiority of one gender over another and leaves the other half to be enslaved domestically. I'm happy to say that I'm not alone in my view, since a lot of philosophers today feel a certain discomfort at the idea of how we define human nature. What then, I asked, is human nature? In the middle of the 20th century, it was popular to suggest that we are a species of killer apes since we have mastered the science of making weapons and use them when we feel the need. However, in making war, we are really not doing what comes naturally. This should not be taken to mean that I don't accept the fact that humans can be violent. From domestic savagery to full-scale war at the state level, human beings are capable of the most horrific kinds of violence. But I believe that our essence is one of sociability. We need each other to survive. Why else would the hunter have settled in communal abodes, turned to agriculture, evolved from nomad, warrior and conqueror to build cities and vast empires that rule the world? Because if we talk of what comes naturally, we mean gregariousness, a desire for each other's company, the start of a family, friendship, camaraderie, communal living, and relationships. Take a good look at yourselves. We are the species whose young needs the longest time to reach adulthood and independence. In the animal world, it requires a few weeks for a young lion cub to mature, a few weeks for a nestling to fly, a mere season for a crop to ripen. We are neither the fastest nor the strongest. We cannot see in the dark, nor can we smell danger as we could one time in the past. We only succeed because we work together. Indeed, our lack of natural advantages such as speed, after all we cannot outrun a predator, or strength, we cannot wrestle an elephant, points the way to the only conclusion: we cannot get all we want through violence. Listen to what John Donne in the 17th century has to say. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sent to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. My concern today, as a media person, is with the representation of women in general and Muslim women in particular in media and literary narratives. Visual and print media, joined by social media in recent years, show images of burqa-clad women being accepted as trademarks for Islam's repression of women. Muddying the waters still further is the use of the headscarf and the wearing of the abaya. An examination of the production of knowledge related to such issues is therefore an imperative if we are to mainstream women's issues into the body politic of our respective countries. My view on these contentious issues is simple. As far as I am concerned, these are matters of individual choice. As long as a woman is not forced to veil herself by family pressure or any other kind of pressure, I have no issue with women veiling themselves. However, when they enter public space in fields of work, they themselves may need to rethink their own stance. For example, a doctor whose face the patient cannot see is hardly likely to induce any confidence in the sick person. It is in this context that an area which requires an immediate and critical overhaul merits examination. The views perpetrated by an irresponsible media, particularly cinematic narratives, is in part responsible for the creation of stereotypes for women. In film after film, television, soap and drama continue to ply the image of a Western woman or westernized woman as the pariah, while juxtaposing the image of the traditional good woman as a Sati Savitri, or in our case, a Nek Parveen. Though Pakistan itself has a complex history of a one step forward, two steps back syndrome, perpetuating the practice of empowering men while wresting rightful power from women, yet some landmark developments have taken place. And for the media to ignore the legitimate struggle for women's rights in the country while flouting the very few women-friendly laws in practice in a throwback to pre-ordinance times, which allowed for a simple 3-time pronouncement ending a marriage, is highly irresponsible. It is the prime moral responsibility of the media to inform, educate, and disseminate the truth. It is therefore all the more reprehensible to sidetrack and ignore the few benchmarks that women's rights activists have wrested from largely insensitive, unresponsive civilian and military governments. The media must therefore highlight any progress made in the contentious equation of empowered men versus vulnerable women, rather than mislead, misinform, and to pipe a stereotypical tune which is music to the ears of the misogynist, patriarchal, socio-cultural constructs that we are saddled with. As someone who has taught young adults at university level for almost 5 decades, oops, you can guess how old I am. I will have to kill all of you. I am acutely aware of the fact that the written word is being displaced by the moving image, the book by the internet, but whatever else may, the efficient and precise use of language will never lose its importance, either in education or in the real world. After all, consider this. It is the idea that metamorphoses into communication and eventually action as it is released into public space. If the idea itself stems from a faulty knowledge base, it assists in creating truths that are false. It is therefore essential that language and knowledge join together to create an intellectual platform for the active pursuit of issues debating women's development and finding solutions to it. Research and education would therefore be the twin tools to employ. Finally, it is imperative that we end on a note of hope. हम सारे आके आप लोगों को झुर्कियाँ देते हैं, ये नहीं हुआ, वो नहीं हुआ. For that, I look to the number of Pakistani women who have inspired and supported me over the better part of my life. Pakistani women have created inroads when none existed. Theatre, film, literature and public service have been well served by a coterie of women swimming upstream. That the state finally recognized the dogged determination of the late Madiha Gohar and chose to award her with a tamga on the country's Independence Day carries a small measure of irony and curious coincidence. That the recognition should come so late is sad. But even sadder is the fact that Madiha's Ajoka theatre will continue to be marginalized and pant along on shoestring budgets. The award is not enough. Measures to encourage, support, and ensure permanence must accompany the medal for it to be a meaningful exercise. I recall the fierce debate resulting from my nomination of Naveed Siddiqui for the Pride of Performance Award a few years ago. When the exquisite dancer was finally selected, it was yet another instance of too little, too late. Femida Riaz turned the literary scene on its shaky head, and her work cartwheeled itself into the hearts of the joyous woman who read her. Not since Ismat Chugtai had any woman dared to write as explicitly and as overtly. Riaz's poetry transformed the passive object of traditional male desire into a living, breathing creature who yearned, desired, rationalized, and survived the savagery of her existence. But perhaps the greatest contribution that Riaz made to the cause of women was to present woman as a thinking being, as in the heart-wrenching argument of Aklima when she says, Aklima ka sar bhi hai, Allah kabhi Aklima se bhi kalam kare aur kuch puche. Hounded for her talent and forced to go into exile, Riaz has stubbornly resisted efforts to tame and temper her fierce spirit until she died recently. Sadia Sumar, Sharmeen Chinoy, Shireen Pasha, Samina Pirzada, and Tanveer Rahman chose another territory which was no less dangerous. Filmmaking is a truly marginalized activity bordering on taboo. That educated women from respectable families should choose a medium of expression historically associated with a particular stratum of society required unprecedented levels of courage and faith. Of the 5, 3 have distinguished themselves with work exhibiting a rare sensitivity and maturity. Pirzada and Rahman have, on the contrary, chosen even more challenging paths. Commercial filmmaking in Pakistan is enough to faze the stoutest of male hearts. Yet, as producers, directors, and set designer, the 2 women are a challenge to the chauvinism of socially acceptable careers. This is by no means the final head count. Asma Jahangir and Hina Jilani devoted themselves all their lives in the service of justice. Reviled, threatened on pain of death, they continued to challenge and be challenged by an insane society perpetuating itself barbarically through self-proclaimed dispensers of the law. That Jahangir received international recognition before her death is no comfort. Or a foundation, Rani and Farida and Shirkat with their modest unobtrusiveness working towards the empowerment of the weak, the wretched, and the forgotten. These are the voices of the new century. Yet, Despite these hopeful beginnings, the dilemma for us in Pakistan is whether we truly believe a new society should be created. If we do, then the next step would be to determine the extent to which we would be willing to stretch ourselves in the pursuit of this goal. And my final point for today, and said, I saw you pause when you looked at the chairs marked elderly. And I'm very glad that you didn't sit in one of them and that you moved on. You know what we as human beings fear the most next to dying? Growing old. You must believe me and listen to this carefully, because you are going to reach this stage also. Being 70 is not a sin and it's not a crime. The great secret that all old people share is that you haven't really changed in 70 years at all. So many of us, and I speak of both men and women, my dear friend Amjad and I were talking about it earlier this afternoon, are terrified of aging. So many of us see the handsome face wrinkle, the once wild mop of hair starts to recede, the trim waist becomes increasingly rotund. Women no longer fancy you as they once did, and if you pay too much attention to the fair sex, you may be liable to being called a dirty old man. Yet, society puts up with the aging male, especially when he has power, status, and money. With apologies to Barbara Lisa. But the same cannot be said for women. The highest compliment we can be paid today is to be told, oh, but you don't look your age. Men and women spend millions of rupees and dollars every year on trying to remain youthful and glamorous, untouched by life and aging. But old age is not a disease. It is strength and survivorship, triumph over all kinds of vicissitudes and disappointments, trials and illnesses. While I personally think of age as a great universalizing force, for me, it's only a number that grows each year. It's the only thing we have in common with other people, because nothing in our youth prepares us for the soul-searching we do when we are middle-aged. Similarly, old age is not a state we enter suddenly after a good night's sleep. Consider for a moment that our seniority at school is measured by promotion from one class to the next after an examination. Unfortunately, life is not like that. Age creeps up on us silently and relentlessly, challenging us every step of the way with questions about identity, love, happiness, and all the things that make life worth living. When I go to the hairdresser, which is seldom, I search the magazines in vain for women past their first youth. The middle-aged face apparently sells neither perfume nor floor wax. Sadly, the role of the mature woman in the media is almost entirely negative. It is ironic, therefore, that one of the greatest icons of feminine beauty, the late Marilyn Monroe, said, "Oh, but I want to grow old without facelifts. They take the life out of a face, the character. I want to have the courage to be loyal to the face I've made. Sometimes I think it would be easier to avoid old age, to die young. But you'd never complete your life, would you? You'd never wholly know yourself." And you all know that she tragically died at age 36. For me, keeping up up appearances of having all your marbles is very hard work for me. Anyway, despite my addiction to Turkish soap operas, I'm really not crazy. I've grown older, not necessarily wiser, but certainly a little funnier. The American actor Betty Davis, whom I admire tremendously, put it so well when she said, "I ask you, if you don't work, what the hell do you do? Sit around and rot. The retirement age of 65 has killed millions. Luckily, I am in an industry with no retirement. They only retire you if you don't make money for them, and I may add, stop thinking. So my anthem for myself and for all the young women sitting here is Malka Pukraj's wonderful song, Abhi To Main Jawan."